Hello and good morning, everyone out there in webinar land. My name is Jeff Buckley. I'm the director here at Insight. It's my great pleasure to welcome you on this Wednesday morning to our webinar called Have You Got 20 Minutes? Exploring a blended approach to AOD learning and skills development. I'll be presenting with my colleague and Insight Program Manager, James Hoey, who will come in later in the session. But before we go on, I'd like to just quickly acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're gathered here in Brisbane, in Meanjin, and also and acknowledge the continuing connection to land, water, culture, and community, and knowledge and teaching passed down from generation to generation, and to pay respects to elders past and present, and to extend that to all of the lands and waterways across Queensland or the country where you may be joining us today in webinar land. I'd also like to take this opportunity to, recognise the lived and living experience of the people that we work with in all of our roles across substance use, mental health, suicide, and the roles of families, carers, and significant others in supporting people, and the reason why we do the work that we do. Neither myself nor James have any conflicts of interest to disclose for this presentation. So, yeah, the point of this presentation is a lot of you will know who Insight and Dovetail are, but just to recap, we're Queensland Health program providers that are based here in Brisbane, provide services across the state in the training and workforce development realm for workers. And we do that through a range of kind of methods and mechanisms, including e-learning, face-to-face workshops, webinars like you're joining here today. We provide, say, clinical or practice-related advice. We develop tools and resources for workers, and we provide newsletters and host forums and events. We're very fortunate to have a multidisciplinary team here at Insight, comprising nurse educators, allied health educators, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health workers, AOD lived experience educators, and ably supported by our multimedia design and administration teams. And we don't see any patients or clients as part of our work. Our workforce are our primary stakeholders, with our aim to build a capable, confident, and connected alcohol and other drug and mental health workforce. And so kind of the purpose of this presentation today is to tell you a little bit of a story about a journey that we've gone on here in Insight, particularly over the past few years around our curriculum and how we've tailored our work to respond to the needs of workers through a bit of a process, which I'll be talking about soon. And the reason why we wanted to tell you a bit about this is because we know that there's a lot of kind of competing aspects and pressures on our workforces. And for us, we're very lucky that we're able to respond to some of those requirements of the workforce by having a multidisciplinary team. We're very fortunate to be embedded within a large tertiary AOD treatment centre here in the middle of Brisbane in Roma Street, which offers a range of kind of services from harm reduction, needle and syringe program, ambulatory withdrawal to more longer term psychosocial treatment. There's also medically assisted treatment of dependence and other kind of services such as sexual health services and the like, and some other sort of counselling and responses. We are also very fortunate being part of government that all of our online learning and resources are available free of charge. And I say this is a good thing. We're not a registered training organisation, even though that does provide, I guess, some qualification benefits. But we understand some of the administration burdens that also has. So we're a lot more flexible in terms of how we're able to operate. However, historically, the not so good bits about the work that we've been doing here in terms of supporting the workforce, we know, and increasingly this seems to be the case, is that workers have very limited time and capacity to attend training. We know, particularly of recent years, there's a real difficulty in finding staff and attracting staff, and often there's a quick turnover, particularly for workers who are new to the workforce. They may stay for a couple of years and then maybe decide it's not for them. Obviously, if they stay longer, they may wish to invest into a longer term career, but there's often a lot of churn. Particularly, our sector has grown quite quickly, and there's new money and funding available. You know, we're attracting people to find out if this is work who maybe haven't worked in the area before, before, particularly considering there's not a lot of formalized kind of pathways into alcohol and drug work through, say, the tertiary education or university sectors. We also know that with increasingly, there's a lot of professional development requirements, there's a lot of mandatory training. And so we're in a competition with a lot of PD requirements before we even think about the time available for workers to provide services and also meet all of the other sort of documentation and requirements that they have within an organisation. There's a lot of access barriers, particularly in a very vastly distributed state like Queensland and Australia more generally, where we have a lot of regional and remote workers. Some of those workers will also have access difficulties in terms of accessing technology. And also with so much training available, that can be difficult for people to understand what are the training requirements or the learning pathways they're required to progress through in order to be able to, I guess, know and have the skills to do the jobs that they're required to do. And we know for a lot of workers, including ourselves, sometimes there's a lack of confidence. Do I know that what I'm doing well, or that I'm good at my job? Particularly for those new workers who are unsure of what are the qualities or the standards that they're required to work at, particularly for workers who are working in isolation, where they may not have other teams or workers to model their practice on, discuss or debrief, even where they may be more formal, say, debriefing or supervision and reflective practice opportunities available to them. For us as educators, our program has grown significantly over the past, particularly 5 years, which has meant we've got this really hairy, sprawling curriculum, often with lots of duplication as different audiences want some of the same, but a little bit different to suit their particular working context. Traditionally, and for a lot of programs like us, we've really focused on that face-to-face training, flying into a region, setting up a workshop and delivering that. But that reaches, say, 20 or 30 people on that one day. And with that workforce churn or, people just not being available on that day, you don't always get that kind of completion rates or that kind of penetration that you're hoping for. It's also very resource intensive, even though we know that some of the outcomes from face-to-face training can be a lot more kind of impactful and extensive. Historically, it's been a very top-down approach. So, we sit in here, we may consult and read the literature, but then we kind of identify what are the training requirements, and it's been largely knowledge-based in its approach. And as I've kind of mentioned before, we have, multiple audiences, not only specialist AOD who do alcohol and drugs all day, every day, but then we've got these kind of audiences such as mental health audiences where alcohol and drug is a big feature, but not necessarily the focus. And then a lot of these other workforces such as community workers, statutory systems, housing homelessness workers, neighborhood centers where alcohol and drug is there, but it's not very the primary focus. So how do you titrate or tailor your training that they get what they need and the level of training that they need to suit their role and their context without overloading them with content that may not be suitable given their kind of setting or their role or their scope of practice. There's also priority populations to focus on. And I guess that notion of focus versus scope is what I was mentioning before when it comes to tailoring training is how do we, where AOD is your focus, how do we provide targeted training to them, whereas where it might be part of your overall scope, but not your primary focus. But trying to work out those learning pathways can be a very challenging kind of task. And as a result, it's very difficult for us to gauge our impact. It's very nice. We get satisfaction surveys and evaluation reports at the end of all of our training or e-learning, which might talk about, whether people enjoyed the training, what they learned from it, but how do we know whether that translates into practice and the impact upon the quality of whether it's clinical or support that is provided to a client or a person at the other end? How do we know that translates all the way through to the impact upon that person's well-being or their treatment outcomes, etc.? So it's often referred to as the train and hope model. So to address some of these kind of feedback that we'd been receiving and our own kind of reflections on our curriculum, we embarked on a curriculum review project in 2022. Uh, it's probably no surprise that a lot of this was sparked on by the change to the whole landscape that occurred as a result of COVID-19 and people working from home and the increased reliance on online and digital learning when face-to-face workshops just simply weren't possible. And it kind of gave us rates within Queensland Health. We also wanted it to be culturally safe and contextualised to align with our Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health equity framework, and was sufficient, even though we're not an RTO, to meet CPD and endorsement requirements for the different professional bodies that many of our workers or disciplines, hail from, so that they could use it as part of their annual CPD requirements. And also for internal kind of quality assurance within organisations that their staff are maintaining a level of kind of knowledge and skills required to perform their roles. So the process for us to review and kind of update our curriculum was as follows. So in 2022, we started, as you do, with a statewide survey, and we had 124 responses, which was effectively trying to identify what are the bits of our curriculum that you like, where do you think there are gaps, and what are the challenges that you might experience in accessing the content that we have to offer. And then we assembled a universal curriculum advisory group with representatives across government, non-government, policy, workforce and sector, and PHNs, etc., to kind of give us advice on what they saw from their perspectives would be the characteristics of a good curriculum that would meet the needs of the workforces that they represented. Once we got that initial high-level feedback, we basically took time out to do some, I guess, a concept development phase where we took a big sledgehammer to all of our content, because some of the biggest feedback we have, and I mentioned earlier, was workshops, it's difficult to get to. Our e-learning was very long. A 3-hour e-learning module is hard to do, or you have to leave it. And we know that once people leave workshop, a product, it's difficult to re-engage them back in. So we decided to break everything up into hundreds of little bits and try to find a way to put them back together in a way that had a bit of logic and a progressive nature to it, and people could see the bigger picture and what they were doing, rather than trying to guess from a name of a workshop or an e-learning course what it contains. So a very modular kind of approach. And then once we drafted that framework, or that kind of modular step progressive approach, took that back out to the sector and held a number of focus groups with a range of government and non-government service providers, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community controlled health organisations, statewide networks, peak organisations, PHNs, some of our peer organisations, and basically got them to titrate, fill in the gaps, add extra content, provide nuance, and suggest other bits and topics or focus areas that we might have missed in our initial concept development phase. We also assembled a couple of content advisory groups around psychosocial interventions and non-residential rehabilitation, and a series of shorter term content advisory groups for specific courses and modules where we wanted to drill down in specific detail. And so we're using these little kind of flexible assemblies of subject matter experts and advisors to give us the feedback that we needed to provide the meat on the skeleton that we'd kind of proposed at the beginning. And I guess from that process, which I guess it's never officially completed, even though some of those broader statewide advisory groups have wound up, we're using this process now to, I guess, progressively update our curriculum with this new roadmap. We've also been very fortunate from the beginning of 2023 to engage two by new AOD lived experienced educators who came aboard just in time to really help, I guess, provide that perspective across both our existing content, but also within new training materials that we've developed ever since, plus also to develop specific content targeting some of our peer AOD workers, which we know are a new and emerging workforce and a big focus areas for lots of organizations at the moment. And then we launched some new website functionality to assist us to, I guess, roll out this curriculum, including learning portals, which some organizations have used to, I guess, help even further guide their workers towards the content most relevant to them. And here's a quote from me, is that a curriculum is never entirely complete or finished. It's in a constant state of iterative improvement and renewal. And I guess from here, it would be, I'm going to pass over to my colleague James, who's going to talk about some of the adult learning principles and the processes that have been involved to, I guess, bring that curriculum map to life in terms of what's passed on to our learners, including yourselves out here in the webinar land. So I'll pass over to you, James.
Thank you, Jeff. And excellent. Thank you very much. I guess, yeah, just picking up on everything that Jeff said, thank you very much for coming along today. I imagine if you're here, you're a good friend of Insight, and we really like to just really acknowledge that, and that everything we're talking about here is, I guess, honoring that relationship that you have with our service, reporting back on what we've done since, taking that big step to engage with the state and the sector for a curriculum review. But I also always feel very humbled talking about this service, being somebody who was an NGO clinician over 20 years ago, coming along here and gaining a lot of value through Insight. So whatever we're talking about here in terms of where we're developing things or where things are moving, that is actually standing on a foundation of so many people that have gone before within this service who've had the same intent to help all workers out there in all services to be able to sharpen their axe, to have that more effective engagement and outcomes working with people who might be experiencing vulnerabilities and adversity associated with their substance use. So thank you for coming along and for giving us the time. So adult learning principles, these are really just a way of framing how training is developed. And I'm not going to speak too much to these points, but hopefully weave it through as we talk about the actions we've taken and what we're doing as a result of looking to redesign and realign our curriculum. So we do want to make sure that we are honouring autonomy, that pathways, whilst we might set up a bit of a structure and an idea of how things could work, that it's self-paced, that these things are important for accessibility and also respecting choice. And as Jeff mentioned, that broad range of learners that we engage with, from those who might be newer in the field or for those who are more seasoned and who are more experienced in their work. So we have broken things down. I know our title today is Have You Got 20 Minutes? So some of our modules in the e-learning space are designed to be that sort of 15 minutes to 30 minutes. There are ones that are longer. So keep us honest on that in terms of your feedback as well. I've been reading some of that recently, and it's like, yeah, we probably need to adjust our times because we do want to make these available so that they can be started, completed within a reasonable time frame, maybe in those moments that people have at work, to be able to engage with this sort of material and then to be able to come back to it and not to have to navigate through large volumes of information to find specific things. We want to make sure that we're using functionality that has increased a lot over the years. So we're fortunate to be doing this at a time that technology has given us much more options to make e-learning, not just sort of like reading a textbook or reading things on screens, but being able to make it interactive and to have the opportunity to take information and then apply it to be able to make decisions through questions, quizzes, case scenarios, and those types of things, because that very much fits along the lines of where adult learning would have us go, and to make sure that we're focused on performance. So this that you're seeing at the moment is a little bit of us kind of pulling back the curtain. This is how we are currently organizing our lives across Insight First Nations service, and also the Dovetail team. And this was the result of that curriculum review in terms of how we translated all the information. I'll break it down a little bit further. If you can't see that on the screen, don't worry. We're just more showing you that there is this kind of, I guess, organized approach to what we're doing. And where I'm going to focus now is a little bit on what we've done in the e-learning. And I'm sure if you've come along today, and as good friends at Insight, I'm not telling you about anything that you don't already know. But in terms of e-learning becoming our foundational, one of our foundational sort of arms of service delivery, if you like, as a platform, because it gives us all those advantages of accessibility and being able to reach across large areas, and particularly a diverse state like Queensland. So from that 33 modules, the sledgehammer of Jeff mentioned, we have really kind of broken this down into a conceptual organization at the moment of 152 asynchronous modules that can be accessed anytime, arranged over sort of 3 main learning levels for our focused work groups here in terms of alcohol and other drug clinicians, mental health, and social and emotional well-being workers, and also another level for all those that are interested, where AOD is certainly within scope but may not be a focus of their role. And we are also hosting some external options as well. So we've reached about 111 modules that we've created. 41, I think I can revise that down into the high 30s at the moment in terms of where we're at. And we have a pipeline of material coming out in the not too distant future, which will keep chipping away at that remaining unpublished series of trainings. But in terms of the levels that we have, the way we've designed this, and I'll break this down a little bit further, is that as you come into our e-learning suite, and these are just recommended pathways. This is where we also want to support autonomy by people choosing their own adventure and their own path through things. But the way we've organized the topics and the material in the e-learning space is to be thinking about, okay, core knowledge. What are the common ground areas of understanding that are really important for effective practice as an AOD worker, or to be working within sort of the AOD space? So they're all grouped under this level 1 called core AOD knowledge, the first things that often people need to know. And then taking that the next step up, we've collected and gathered together and curated those things that are more AOD skills, where we're talking about the practical skills that workers may need in any role, really, to have those daily interactions with people who might be impacted from their substance use, or working with families who are impacted by a loved one and their substance use. And then there's a level 3. So level 2, just to let you know, and you'll see that in a few moments' time, is kind of the biggest area of where we're grouping together e-learnings and organizing that pathway. Then we have this 3rd level around specific roles within AOD, and that'll become clearer as I break it down in a few moments' time, so I won't spend time duplicating that conversation. And as I said, this additional level, nominally level 4 in a way, and more for non-AOD, non-mental health, non-social emotional wellbeing workers who are interested, who have AOD showing up every day, often in the types of issues that people are presenting or co-occurring with the issues that they're presenting with, where we want to still be able to make sure that there's good knowledge, good approaches, good understanding, I guess also good philosophical approaches in how people might be engaging with those. So in terms of our level 1, we can fit all that on one screen. Don't get too close to reading all the little cards underneath. This is just how we've organized our way of mapping our way through and navigating our way through all the excellent feedback that we got, and the core development of this approach. So we have there about 8 courses across this series, and very much looking again at that kind of common ground, as I mentioned, of understanding that's important for effective practice. So whether that be from understanding things like the contemporary approaches through the AOD Essentials course, understanding some of the contexts of our clients, whether right through to different priority populations, the system as well, because sometimes new in this area, we're not aware that there are these various different ways, and there's a continuum of treatment options that are available and approaches, and also some of the things that help us to maintain ourselves in this work as well. Reflective practice, those things about understanding ourselves, and some of the ethical and legal dimensions that we need to consider in AOD work. So I'll just push through this in terms of, again, not wanting you to have to look at kind of lots of little boxes on a screen. But level 2, again, just going across the top line there with the courses, this is moving into that area of the practical application of the types of techniques and intervention strategies that are really core across AOD work, not only AOD work, but certainly that we know that are tried and tested and serve us well in the work that we do. So basic counselling skills, motivational interviewing as a core way of not only sort of delivering, but approaching the work with people, screening and brief interventions. You see all the topics there. If you're wanting to know some of the color coding, if it's in white, then it's public and it's available. If it's in the sort of reddy pinky color, it's still under development or it's in the pipeline of development. So as you can see there, we have managed to fairly populate some of the courses more so, and we are currently in the process, things like withdrawal management in doing those sort of pieces of work. Continuing the level 2, I guess, scope of the modules available and the courses that people can dip in and out of as needed. All our pathways are recommended, so however it is that you wish to engage with this material in whatever order, ours are only sort of a suggestion. As you see there, we're still building in some of those other areas of core practice around working with people who might be experiencing suicidal thoughts and or in acute phases or longer term recovery phases from suicide. Jeff mentioned AODP work practice is an area that we're currently developing. We hope in the next not too distant future to have some more work, more of options out there available for our growing and expanding peer workers. Those modules should be coming out very soon. So quite a range of topics, and right smack there in the middle, out there now for everyone to be able to access from our great Dovetail team is some very substantial and comprehensive modules about engaging and working with young people. So if anyone is doing that and not visited those, I would very much encourage you to have a look. And here we go into those specific roles in our level 3. So our Queensland Opiate Treatment Program, colleagues, those who are prescribers and dispensers, particularly around the changes that came into Queensland around real-time reporting. So we host a lot of learning and training for our medical officers and our pharmacists across the state in understanding those systems, engaging with clients who might be experiencing issues as a result of engaging with prescription medications, telephone counselling, police court diversion, service provider training. We also have that available, particularly with some of the changes that are coming up to that as from the 3rd of May. And our aim is to really develop a strong series of e-learnings that are accessible around working with co-occurring conditions in the area of mental health, but doing it from an AOD perspective, because often it's done the other way around, which is not bad. It's just in terms of the audience that we want to be supporting. Our level 4 for our non-AOD, non-social emotional wellbeing and mental health workers, currently that is an expanding suite, and we're wanting to really put together some introductory type information that's going to give people a good foundation of understanding and working not only with the person directly, but also understanding the system to which people can be linked into as well. So that's that side of things. It looks like that on a big, what's called a Miro board for us, but how it appears to everybody out there when you come to our website, and I'm sure I'm not showing you anything you haven't seen, is that it's a series of tiles, as we call them, which talk about the different modules. And over here in navigating, we have the ability, if you just want to be looking at the different levels, you also can search through our landing page as well if you're looking for a particular topic. Anything on our side, including an e-learning that might cover that particular area of interest, will appear to be able to be accessed. We also then have all the courses listed individually. This is a slide here, so I can't do it interactively to show you, but we're always looking to try and improve the navigation ability around this, so very welcome to any feedback that you may want to give. Some encouraging data since we've launched. So we actually launched this, the beginnings of this new suite, and then progressively in adding to it in that time, and we'll still be adding to it probably into next year to do this well. But since just looking at this financial year from the 1st of July 2023, in terms of our core modules, the ones that we've developed that are not hosted modules, we've had about 37,000 completions of individual modules. So that's where people have worked through them from beginning to end. It may not be in one sitting, but they've actually moved through to completion. Previously, over a full year, we would have had about 17,000. So we're well and truly on track to be seeing the results from breaking these modules down to being things that are having some utility and effectiveness for people. And we're looking at an 84% completion rate. Well, having checked it again this morning, we are, which is well above industry standards. And we've got a good satisfaction rate, which is always good. But you know, I'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of like satisfaction rate is great, but we're also always looking for more and more qualitative information to be able to help us build this and refine it and test and adjust. But we've got about 3,500 active learners at the moment, about 30,000 subscribers. So just to let you know, because e-learning is something that can easily, you might have seen this and you might have even experienced it with some of our modules where once it's out there, it can sort of like sit and exist, and it can very quickly, often issues can arise or policies can change, different information, different statistics, different, particularly if there's external links in modules as well, that they can sometimes no longer be supported. So just to give you some understanding and hopefully some confidence in the integrity of what we develop. Because we're going to have this big suite of over about 130 or 40 e-learning modules, we do have now in place and have already commenced a review cycle process for quality assurance, where each module goes through a minor review every 2 years and at least a major review every 2 years as well, and can be ad hoc at any time. So that if there is a change or if there is something that requires some immediate attention, that we can pull that down and make changes and republish. We're also looking in part of this review cycle at the moment to make sure that we can be developing our modules so that they are accessible. We have technical accessibility functions because the program we use meets the International Web Content Accessibility Guideline standards. I think it's up to 2.2 is the current version of those standards, but we also want to make sure that in the content that's reflected as well. This is why we love feedback. And at the end of each module, there's the ability to do a survey. There's a couple of qualitative questions at the end. I know if you don't have time, don't do that, but I just want to let you know that we honor that feedback. When we're going through our reviews, we download it, we go through it, particularly always interested in the things that could be better about modules as well. And there's a lot of that there at the moment. It's very helpful, so thank you if you've given that to us, but please keep it coming. So that's the e-learning space. Just very briefly, I wanted to talk to you about workshops. And just if you've attended any of our workshops, thank you very much. Just wanted to let you know that as part of this review and renewal process, we are going through a very intentional way of looking at applying a model. Some of you may be aware of it. Kathy Moore is the developer of this. It's used by a lot of large organizations around the world. And we are applying this action mapping methodology to how we develop our workshops. What that's about Action mapping, really, to put it simply, where is it's actually looking at making sure that training or training events uh, or training options facilitate change, and that change they're facilitating is the type of change that helps people in their real world roles. If I was going to put it as simply as possible, that's how I would say it. So we're integrating this methodology. It takes a little bit of a different reframe on how to develop training, away from what do people need to know, more towards what do people need to be able to do, and how can we actually help them through the training events, whatever it be, whether it be workshops face-to-face, whether it be e-learnings, whether it be other types of options, to be able to have practice at doing that. So just to hopefully not bore you, but really, I guess we want to be very transparent about how we're going about our work, uh, is the action mapping approach is very much to begin with this idea of, if we are going to run a workshop, it's a big investment of people's time for organizations to release people, for people to be able to take a day out of their work to come along. So we really need to honor that and make sure that those experiences help people in what it is that they do every day. So the way we're thinking about workshops now using this action management approach is to begin, it's almost like working backwards. What is it that is the change out there in the workplace that we're looking for, the change out there in people's practice, the change out there in the way that things are done? That's the beginning point. So we're wanting to know, what's the change goal? And then the next layer of that is to think about, well, what is it that workers need to be able to do to be able to achieve that goal? So the observable actions, the things on the job, and this links back to adult learning. Adult learners don't come along, they come along because they want real-time solutions to things that are happening in the workplace now. I want to be able to take training and use it tomorrow. That's very much some of the fundamental foundations of what that approach, theory, model is about. So this approach asks that question: what are the things that people need to be able to do? So to make it happen, then it kind of just splits a little bit. And I'll give you an example of this in a moment, which hopefully will make it a bit clearer. So for people to be able to do that action, is it is it a skill they need to learn? And a skill is something that if you, in defining that, it's like something that if you, it'll improve over time if you keep doing it. So it's that kind of concept about what we're talking about in terms of splitting skill and knowledge. Knowledge is what it is that I might need to be able to know to be able to do this. And both of them are important. If it's a skill, then the action mapping approach would tell us, and this is how we're starting to progressively redesign our workshops, is that rather than content's not abandoned, but rather than the focus being about, well, what is it people need to be able to know to do that skill, it's actually designing practice activities for people to have a go at doing it. So we're to try and make those practice activities as realistic as possible so that people get the opportunity to deliver and do those things, do all the neurological connections that then start to happen as you have a go at doing a skill. So training becomes about developing a series of practice activities, and then the knowledge that's needed to do that practice activity. So in terms of designing content, the content becomes about just that essential information that gives people the opportunity to be able to practice within a training environment, to a lesser extent, but we're certainly trying to increase the scope of this within our e-learnings so that people can learn by doing, particularly when it's a skills focus. And then we organize the information that's needed to do that. It doesn't all have to be up front. Sometimes it's actually learned and experienced and drawn out as we actually are doing the activity or in the debrief afterwards. So I won't get too technical on that side of things, but it's how we're really starting to look, and we put through about 4 of our workshops at the moment through this process on the Insight team. We started piloting those at the beginning of this year, and we're still in the iterative stages. But if anyone's attended a workshop recently, hopefully you might have seen some of this happening. On the knowledge side, that's if it is more about content, because again, as I said, that's not abandoned, it's not gone. This approach asks, well, where does that information need to be stored? Is it in memory? If it is needed to be known in memory, then we actually have to make sure that not just teach the knowledge, but to actually give people a practice activity to be able to use that knowledge in a way, whether it's to make a decision, to make an assessment, to come up with a formulation or an intervention. So that again, it's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, because that assumption that if you know something that will change practice is what action mapping probably challenges a little bit. It's more that, yeah, knowledge applied is the way that we learn as adults. However, there's also this other side of it, because sometimes knowledge doesn't need to be stored in memory. And sometimes it's really important that knowledge is not, we don't rely on memory for things. Pilots don't rely on memory for doing their checks in flight, pre-flight, post-flight. That's all very much laid out in a list. That's very important because we don't want steps missed. Some of our practice is also the same. So what action mapping has, and you'll probably see this happening a lot more in our work here at Insight, is that if there's important knowledge, doesn't need to be stored in memory, then rather than a training event, you create a job aid or a job resource, something that people pick up, can use, that embeds the theory, that embeds the knowledge or the information that can be then used by workers. And if it is a job aid, we still need to think about, well, does a worker need to be shown how to use the resource? If that's the case, or the job aid, that's great. We do training around the job aid rather than asking people to memorize a whole lot of information. If people don't need to be trained in using the job aid, then we just launch it. To give you a practical example of this action mapping approach, then I just want to very quickly take you through a bit of a way of thinking. Say if we saw the need, or through the feedback that we received, a need maybe for training that increased the capacity of non-AOD specialist workers or non-AOD specialist service providers in being able to provide AOD-related harm reduction information and advice to the people that they were seeing. So in an action mapping world, that's the change that we're wanting to see out there. And this is not the whole picture here, but I've just broken out two actions in that action ring. That first thing that we look at, what do workers need to be able to do? Well, one of them obviously is being able to have a conversation using potentially a brief intervention approach. But the second part of that is obviously then the specific information, the strategies around harm reduction for each substance. So for that top one there, that's definitely what we would consider a skill. So if that's a skill, then we need to design training that actually has you practicing delivering brief interventions, not just talking about it. Certainly we need to, in the information side of things, give you brief intervention frameworks, but that needs to be also linked very strongly with practice activities. Harm reduction strategies and information. Remember thinking here about non-AOD specialists. That's a lot of information. If you go drug by drug, or even drug classifications by drug classifications or routes of administration, there's a lot of information there. So that type of knowledge, does it really need to be stored in memory? Potentially it could be, if you're really interested and really across this, but it's not always the case that is what can occur for people. So we would suggest the best way then to be training that with this this non-AOD specialist workforce is to develop job aids where people don't have to rely on, okay, what are the harm reduction strategies for alcohol versus benzodiazepines versus GHB, ketamine, and a lot of these other kind of substances that we know are causing concerns for some people out there. So in terms of developing a job aid, then yes, we probably then need to look at, well, what's ways that we can help people or guide them through using those job aids, where we build in the theory, we build in the information, that they are available as resources then, that are job aids that are quick resources that solve immediate problems, that they can be there just in time. I don't have to rely on memory. I can actually kind of just go and grab this particular job aid or tool, resource, whatever we want to call it, and that we can use that, and we're actually then delivering evidence-based practice on the job to enhance the performance to meet that original goal. So that's just a bit of a quick overview about the sort of work we're doing. It's iterative, as Jeff said, so it means we're constantly looking at kind of reviewing and improving. We've still got a ways to go, and we wouldn't say that we're there yet. But I'm just going to hand back to Jeff now, because he might talk about a bit of a more practical application of everything that we've just spoken about.
Thanks, James, and thanks everyone. And that's a great description and breakdown of that action mapping process, which has been really helpful for us to really think about, yeah, what are the resources that are most useful for the right topic for the right worker. And so, talking about job aids, we're very proud, and we've coincided the launch of a series of new job aids today, which will be going out in approximately 2 minutes' time. I think we scheduled them for 10:45. Um, we have had check tools out before. They were these A3 tear-offable kind of pads, which had lots of color and you could write into them. We released them in 2018 and there was some quite a good feedback on them. But there was also feedback that the A3 nature was a little bit annoying, that it was difficult for scanning and printing or giving to people. So we spent a bit of time and have reviewed them and we've kind of reconceptualized them. So these check tools are guided brief interventions and information brochures all in one. They're designed for flexible and modular use. They adopt a conversational approach. So it's kind of written as if like a worker is in the tool and using the correct language and the tone and the evidence base, the language that we accept as best practice in alcohol and other drug, and in a conversational kind of way, so that if anyone picks them up, and I guess they are particularly targeted towards non-AOD specialists because we know that a lot of people say within general health or mental health or other community kind of sectors and contexts may not know exactly the right way to ask the question or pose it or what language to use. So we've kind of taken that away by giving that language in there. And the other thing is that because they're kind of a brochure and a brief intervention, they can be taken away by the person and that it kind of talks to the person. They could complete it themselves if they wish. We've made them all A4, they're all modular and they can be downloadable and they're now editable PDFs as well, which is helpful for people who want to do them on a laptop or on a computer. So there's five different tool types. There's five brief assessments on the top five substances we focused on for now, and then five harm reduction focused ones, again on those same five substances: alcohol, cannabis, stimulants, opioids, and benzodiazepines, just because the information is very substance specific for those. But we then got another three tools which are generic in terms of they can be used for any substance or indeed where polysubstance use might be occurring, around exploring the impacts of the substance use or whether people might be thinking about making changes or recording kind of their substance use if they're monitoring it at home. So I'm going to give you a really quick tour of these tools now. So this is now live on our website. So if you go to our homepage, you will see it's live here now at Insight Check Tools. And you'll see if you scroll down that there's a guide, but we've also broken them down according to the five key substances. So we've got, cannabis check tools, stimulant check tools, where those individual kind of component tools are listed, including these ones, which will be the same for every toolkit because they're the same, but obviously the brief assessment and the harm reduction ones are specific to the substance, again for opioids, and then for benzos. And so the brief assessment is fairly similar for all of them. You can type your name in and give the date, and then, it's what age did you first type, what type of substance is it, route of administration, patterns of use, and particular events, times, or places might influence use. And then, from there, you might want to decide if you want to move on to a different kind of tool if you want, or maybe that's all the time you've got for now. They're all the same like that, except for, I guess, alcohol, which we've actually just built in the audit C into this one because you know that normative feedback around, alcohol is really effective and it's a very standardized kind of approach. So that one's a little bit different, but the other ones are all very similar to that first one I showed you. Um, this is the combined version, so I'll use this to show you these other tools, these generic tools. This is our second one called Understanding Your Substance Use. If anyone knows the 4Ls approach, liver, lover, lifestyle, law, it incorporates status first to explore the impact of the relationship of substances across health, that physical, mental, emotional, relationships or kinship for lover, lifestyle in terms of its effect on your work, rest, and play, and legal concerns in terms of the law. So again, with lots of prompts for maybe less experienced workers to prompt the person to think about and draw those connections between their substance use and that particular topic. We then have expanded that out to look at what we're calling the 3 Cs, which might be more relevant or appeal to First Nations kind of clients or from people from refugee and migrant backgrounds or from overseas, around connection to community, connection to country or place, and connection to culture, which, as you I believe the social emotional wellbeing framework of these apply to all of us, and it would be good to ask everyone, regardless of whether the person may be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander or from overseas. And then there's the last one around, other things you might have thought of, like, all of those perhaps incidences, getting into a fight, losing your wallet, regretted sex, passing out, that might be linked to person's substance use. There's a money calculator because we know that some people get a bit of a shock once they realize how much they're spending on substances, which might be a motivator for change. And some further discussion around the impact of the amount they might be spending on their substances. And then a non-validated, but you'll recognize a number of kind of indicators that someone's use might be in the physical or psychologically dependent kind of range. So just to kind of open up that conversation. A couple of readiness or change rulers here around how worried the person might be around their substance use and which particular substance or substances, and how confident they are to make changes, and maybe an exploration of what their concerns might be if they did make changes. And again, more options from there. I mean, that could be a very big conversation. It could have happened over various kind of sessions, but options about what do you want to do next are giving some of that agency and control to the person about where they want to go with that information. If they are thinking about cutting back or quitting, you might move along to this tool 3. You'd be familiar with this. It's like, a change plan effectively, some of the reasons, who are the supports, some of the barriers and strategies. And then it kind of moves into that kind of information brochure with some psychoeducation around managing cravings, tips around, 3Ds, urge surfing, self-awareness, some sort of mindfulness and tips around managing cravings, and some encouraging kind of concept. So again, uh, it's designed to be taken away by the person. It's interactive, but it's a tool as well. And then we've got these harm reduction kind of specific ones. And again, interactive. We know that a lot of people already do harm reduction strategies themselves, so we don't want to assume that they don't. But it's like, hey, reinforcing, hey, it's really great that you might set limits or drink a water in between each one, so that they can tick, yes, I do it, might consider it, or no, that's not going to work. So they're very substance specific. And again, information brochure. These are double-sided and could be handed out with lots of just tips and advice, psychoeducation, including, tips for pregnant, breastfeeding, or parenting, and responding to overdose. And then, maybe a bit of a self-reflection around, okay, when would it be a problem for you? When for you would it be a sign for you that it's time to take a break and seek help? And lastly, this is a little table we've developed, an unplanned substance use recording tool that the person can take away to kind of, if they, unintentionally use or do use, and want to reflect upon it, to reflect why, what was the occasion, what was the situation, what could you do differently next time? So a self-reflection tool there. So yeah, so we have all these different harm reduction tools. We're very conscious they're text heavy. This is our first beta version, and we were trying to make them single page handouts. So we do recognize that they're very dense literacy wise. But we also kind of know that, they're designed to be clinician administered or worker administered. So it's up to the worker to interpret and apply them based on, I guess, the setting or the developmental appropriateness or the language abilities of the person you're working with. So you can see it like that. But also, for, I guess, the less experienced kind of worker, they're kind of like a training tool. So as James mentioned, if you do these long enough, or you go through these harm reduction and psychoeducation pieces of advice, you will be committing them to memory. So workers may not have to rely on these tools always with a person that they're working with or a client. They may remember that more opportunistically when they're having maybe a harm reduction chat, or talking with someone around their opioid use and go, oh, let's talk about naloxone, etc. So they're like a surrogate training tool for workers as well, giving them the language and the terminology that's most appropriate. So explore them. We've developed a guide on how to use them, which looks like this, so that we can talk through some of the tips that might sit underneath the guide. They're not validated and structured. You don't have to work through them sequentially and in order. You can pick and choose bits and pieces. You can skip sections. They're really just putting words and tools and strategies and techniques into the hands of workers, and some advice around how you might apply them to kind of get some really meaningful, change-oriented, motivationally enhanced, informed, client-centered, person-centered kind of conversations with clients. So that guide is available there. And then we have other tools within our inventory that we link to, such as the wonderful vape check tool that our Dovetail team have created and their guide. And we've also previously developed like a relapse prevention tool called Stay on Course, and there's a brochure and some advice around using that, plus some sensory tools, using your senses to cope tool as well. So yes, that's a quick tour of those tools. They're available now. We'd love feedback. Um, we are focusing now more on job aids to complement the suite of e-learning and workshops that we are progressively kind of updating and rolling out. Our next plan, once we get feedback, is to create low literacy version of those check tools that can be used with particular groups where that may be a particular concern, or maybe of more benefit. We know that instructional and practice demonstration videos are very popular because workers get to see theories and concepts and knowledge and skills in action. So we're always working on developing more of those. And in recognition of workers' decreasing lack of time and opportunity, we're going to be embarking on mini classes, which are online, maybe half an hour to 1.5 hour, single or one or two practice tips or skills or particular components that we can offer at various times throughout the week, just for those workers who won't be released for a full day workshop, but want to just develop a skill, maybe in doing, say, a 4-column diagram, or how to do a withdrawal, an assessment around withdrawal, or how to do a harm reduction intervention around a particular substance. So that's another thing that we're trialing. So I'm conscious of time. In summary, continuous improvement and innovation is required to make sure training approaches reflect the need of a broad, ever-evolving kind of multidisciplinary workforce. Our primary organising question has to always be, what do workers need to be able to do in order to be able to perform their jobs? And we're really focusing on just-in-time tools and resources, such as job aids, plus bite-sized learning, instructional videos and mini classes, which are designed around those adult learning principles to be probably the most effective and efficient way to train an adult workforce who are on the job in the industry. And so, yes, we're open for questions. And a number of you have sent some questions through, which I'm going to just quickly look at here. Yes, all of our online modules and tools are free to use. There's a question around integrating the e-learning and training into the workplace. That's up to the workplace to really decide. And I know a lot of workplaces might tune into these webinars or use it as a kind of team reflective process or practice kind of opportunity. Or, some workers might be a champion in a particular topic and do the learning and then might present key bits of it to their colleagues. Some of the ways that they might integrate it into the workplace. Because we're not a mandated or a required training pathway for organizations, it's really a smorgasbord for services or managers and team leaders to choose what they want their workers to do. And often, where it doesn't necessarily line up with internal policy and procedure, established practice approaches, it may be that, you might do some modules, but don't do these because we've got our own kind of processes or training that describe how a particular approach is actioned within our workplace. Having said that, we are very open to working and partnering with service providers that if there's, say, a module of ours, which is like 80% there, but if it only had this extra 20%, it would be perfect for your service. I talked about learning portals before. We can work with you. And depending how big it is, either we could do it for free or there may be a small charge depending on the labor costs involved in our end, but tailor a particular module for your organizational purpose, and then we can put it in a learning portal so that only workers who sign up with your organizational, say, email address or email handle will have access to it. So no one else needs to see it. So that's a part of that website functionality that we've developed called learning portals. So get in touch if that's something that might be of interest to you. Because yeah, we know that we're trying to target our content content to the broadest audience possible, and some tailoring and specifying or narrowing it can be really useful rather than duplicating it when there's only a few little bits of difference. There's a question around the difference between level one core AD knowledge and the content for the non-specialist, non-AD, non-mental health workforce. There is a lot of overlap. However, for the non-specialist workforce, I guess it's a highlights reel or like it's probably cherry picking what we think are the most important things if that worker's only going to do maybe, and it would be longer, like an hour e-learning, but they would probably get the most important things that we would want a worker who's not doing working with substances every day in a more of a treatment support role, what we'd want them to know. What are the highlights reels, I guess. So that's the difference. But if you did that and then went back to level one core knowledge, you would find a number of the same lessons or components littered throughout those. So that's, I guess, the difference. It's kind of respecting workers' times. Let me see, what other questions do we have? Thank you for your kind feedback. Thank you. Yep, we'd be more than happy to partner on the translator check tools. That would be awesome. Yes, we've just literally finished these last week. It's our beta model. I guess we'd love to partner on translating them both for other languages and for low literacy. Yes, all of these resources are available. We know that hospitals are a really important part. Upon departure, you've got like a brief window of opportunity prior to kind of release to have a brief intervention. So a lot of these tools might be suitable for that, particularly like a brief intervention or a harm reduction intervention could be useful, particularly as that person's maybe waiting to be picked up to go home or is leaving. Thank you. I think that's it. What's the most challenging part of the review process? It's a really good question. The most challenging part is trying to, because there's so many different parts of the workforce, from specialists to people who say the mental health, which have a huge overlap, but it's not all alcohol and drug, to then I guess workers in say housing and homelessness, or in statutory systems like this child safety, youth justice and adult corrections where substance use is ever present, is trying to find a curriculum that meets the needs of as many people as possible without us having 7 versions of effectively the same content just to tailor it to each of those workers. Hence the sledgehammer approach, and really putting it over to the worker themselves and their team leaders and services to pick and choose the ones that they think are most relevant and create their own learning pathway from the smorgasbord that we have on offer, rather than trying to create or define that learning pathway based on our perspectives of what we think people should know. It's probably giving this kind of really modular, flexible approach to give that autonomy over to those services to pick and choose that themselves. The content is huge. Keeping everything up to date is huge. Keeping the technology of our custom-built learning management system up to date is a challenge. So it's trying to balance all of those pressures at once. So that's probably the biggest challenge. James, did you have? Yeah, and also there's lots of policy changes that are happening all the time. Like in Queensland here, as James mentioned, like there's a new police court diversion program that's come out. So how do you respond to quickly the content reflects that? Or whenever the new national drug strategy household data comes out, which modules have the old data in it and how do you update that? So how do you keep content contemporary in a very fluid, ever-changing kind of landscape within the AD world? Are the tools adapted for Aboriginal clients? No, not specifically, although we have obviously mentioned suggestions, and we've used those 3 Cs modules so that for some Aboriginal people or for workers, it'll have some relevance and some language and concepts which are specific. But perhaps another step would be working to create more contextualized tools. There's always a challenge between trying to find one tool to rule them all, that's suitable for everyone. That was our first game, is a tool that suits the broadest number of audiences. From there, we can look at contextualized versions, maybe like we said, for low literacy, maybe for young people, for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, clients or people or communities, for culturally linguistically diverse. There's opportunities to create even subsections of tools because we are looking at that flexible approach. So the worker might just want to do one 5-minute conversation on one thing, and that's it. And if that tool can help you do that, that's perfect. And that's why we recommend with the tools, you don't have to follow it step by step. You might pick up that let's explore your substance use and just do the calculator bit or the readiness to change ruler, conversation, and that's all you do. So it's just putting the language and the tools in the hands of workers in a just-in-time approach. Yes, it is. This is recorded and the slides are available and it will be online within a few days. Look, we're over time. I really appreciate everyone giving up your valuable time to join us and to, I guess, hear about some of the journey that we've been on here in our humble little building in Roma Street in Brisbane. We really appreciate all of the wonderful feedback and the time that workers have given us to shape the curriculum in the way that we do, the generosity in terms of, on the ground experience about what really flies and doesn't fly with a person, in treatment or in a hospital or in a clinical setting. That's really valuable. And those little insights, having them, glimmers all the way through our training is really valuable to ground it within practice, which is really, really important. And I'd really like to, I guess, acknowledge both your work, your time and your expertise and your wisdom and your case studies and scenarios and practice wisdom, but also the work of our educators across our team, across Insight and Dovetail, to synthesize that into training materials that then has benefits to the broader workforce, both here in Queensland and we know across the country and sometimes overseas as well, who kind of stumble across us and kind of use our learning because we haven't locked it down because it's actually really difficult to lock down content and we don't want to. So that's been really great. And our multimedia team, it's incredible what they're able to do on such a small budget and limited resources to kind of bring that training to life and make it more accessible and engaging and interactive. And our admin officers who keep it all ticking over and keeping us all organized and everything working. So I just want to say thank you to everyone to make it, because it's a big team effort across area. And we're really happy to partner with, and we already are doing this with other jurisdictions, other providers to always take our training content to the next level and to meet the needs of the workers who you are there to support or to, who are doing the job on the ground at the coalface and in very challenging kind of circumstances.